All right, let's take a deep breath together before we begin. There's been a lot of confusion floating around the spiritual space when it comes to twin flames. So many people, especially those identifying as the divine feminine, find themselves wondering, why does it feel like I'm more awake than my counterpart? Why does he feel so far behind? And that's a fair question. But it's also one that requires more depth and nuance than most people are giving it. This journey is not about assigning roles of more spiritual or less conscious. It's not about measuring who's ahead and who's behind. It's about learning, unlearning, healing, and remembering who you truly are. And more than anything, it's about coming back to balance, within yourself first, and then in time with your twin. So today, we're going to unpack this idea that the divine feminine is somehow more awake than the divine masculine. We'll look at where this belief comes from, what might be misunderstood, and how each energy carries its own form of awakening. And we'll do it gently, honestly, and without judgment, because this journey is hard enough without us adding shame or blame into the mix. Let's begin. Let's start by looking at why so many divine feminines feel like they're the more awakened twin. Often, the divine feminine is the one who stumbles upon the idea of twin flames first. She's the one who feels the soul bond most intensely. She's the one doing the shadow work, diving into inner child healing, studying chakras, meditating, journaling, crying in the middle of the night, and trying to make sense of it all. It feels like she's doing all the work, and meanwhile, her twin flame, the divine masculine, is off living his life like nothing ever happened. Naturally, this can leave her feeling abandoned, confused, and yes, more spiritually advanced. But here's what we need to understand. What we call awakening doesn't always look the same on the outside. Just because someone isn't talking about shadow work or reading spiritual books doesn't mean they're not going through something just as deep, just as transformative, in their own way. You see, the divine feminine's awakening tends to happen on the emotional and spiritual planes first. She feels the changes internally. Her heart cracks open, her soul stretches wide, and suddenly she's seeing life with new eyes. This can be very dramatic, very intense, and very noticeable. That's why it feels more awake. But the masculine's awakening is often slower, quieter, and more rooted in the physical. He's learning through his experiences, through his mistakes, through the lessons of the material world. It might not look spiritual from the outside, but that doesn't mean it isn't happening. The belief that one is ahead comes from misunderstanding how different the process is for each polarity. It's not that the feminine is more awake, it's that she's awakening differently. And when we stop comparing the journeys and start respecting them, something powerful happens. We release the need to control or rush the process. And that shift in itself is a form of awakening. Now let's look at the divine feminine's path more closely. Because yes, her awakening is real. It's deep, it's painful, and it changes everything. When the divine feminine wakes up to the twin flame connection, it often cracks her open in ways she wasn't prepared for. It brings up every wound she's been carrying since childhood: abandonment, rejection, unworthiness, fear of not being loved. It forces her to look at herself honestly, even when it hurts. And for many, this is where the spiritual journey really begins. She starts searching, looking for meaning, trying to understand why this connection feels so powerful and why it hurts so much. And in that search, she finds herself diving into her own soul. She begins meditating, learning to be still. She learns to sit with her pain instead of running from it. She connects with her intuition. She begins healing not just for herself, but for the ancestral patterns that have followed her bloodline for generations. It's beautiful. And it's hard, and it's easy, in the middle of that depth, to assume she's the one carrying all the weight. But here's the trap. When the feminine thinks she's the only one doing the work, she starts to fall into resentment. She starts waiting for her twin to catch up. She starts believing that union will only happen once he's fixed. And that belief, it actually blocks the flow of love. Because the truth is, the feminine's awakening isn't just about spiritual tools or emotional depth. It's about learning to surrender, to soften, to trust, to stop trying to lead both journeys at once. The more she focuses on her own healing and lets go of needing to monitor her counterpart's growth, the faster everything aligns. Because she begins to embody her truth rather than chasing someone else's. That's the real power of her awakening. It's not about being more awake. It's about becoming more whole, more rooted, more open to life without needing to control it. Now let's flip the coin and talk about the divine masculine. His journey looks different, not because he's asleep, but because he's learning in a different language. The masculine energy is all about structure, action, survival, and logic. So when the twin flame connection enters his life, he doesn't naturally go inward the way the feminine does. In fact, many divine masculines reject the connection at first. They might run, they might shut down, they might ghost. And on the surface, this can seem like avoidance, but underneath, something is moving. You see, the divine masculine learns by being tested in the external world. While the feminine is pulled inward to feel, the masculine is pushed outward to face. He's thrown into situations that challenge his identity, his beliefs, his sense of power. He might lose a job, experience a breakup, or go through a spiritual crisis without even realizing it's spiritual. And here's the thing, it's not that he doesn't feel the connection. He does, but it threatens everything he thought he knew. Love for him isn't soft and flowing. It's responsibility, pressure, and fear of failure. When he meets his feminine, it triggers his deepest fear, that he's not enough. That's why he distances himself. Not because he doesn't care, but because he's terrified of being seen, truly seen, and not measuring up. His awakening is about rebuilding himself from the inside out, not by reading spiritual texts or doing moon rituals, though he might eventually, but by learning to face his emotions, take accountability, and open to vulnerability. And that path, though less talked about, is just as sacred. So no, he's not less awake. He's just being awakened through different fires. And sometimes it's the slow burn that creates the deepest change. Here's where many get it wrong. They treat awakening like a race. Step 1, then step 2. The feminine does this, then the masculine does that. But awakening doesn't work that way. It's not linear. It's spiral. It circles back, it deepens, it repeats. And just when you think you're done, something new gets stirred up. That's why comparison is so toxic in the twin flame journey. The moment you start thinking you're further along or more enlightened, you've stepped out of your heart and into ego. Even if that ego is spiritual in nature. Everyone's path is timed differently. You might awaken emotionally at 25, while your twin starts awakening spiritually at 40. You might feel ready for union years before they do. And that's okay. The truth is, we all awaken in waves. There are seasons of clarity and seasons of confusion. There are moments when you feel deeply connected to your soul, and others when you forget who you are entirely. And none of it means you're failing. In fact, one of the deepest lessons in the twin flame journey is learning to let go of timelines altogether, to stop expecting it to look a certain way, to release the pressure on yourself and your twin, and to trust that every step, no matter how messy, is guiding you home. When you stop obsessing over who's awake and who's behind, you start to see the real beauty of the journey. You're not waiting for someone else to change. You're remembering how to be fully you. And in that remembering, something sacred shifts, not just in you, but in them too. Let's talk about something most feminines have felt at some point. Why am I the only one doing the work? It's a lonely feeling. You're journaling, meditating, releasing, growing, and your twin seems MIA. Maybe they're with someone else. Maybe they're partying every weekend. Maybe they're silent. And it makes you feel like the burden of this connection is on you. But here's a truth that may surprise you. Even when it looks like you're doing it alone, you're not. The twin flame connection is a shared energy field. What you shift, they feel. What they resist, you sense. There's an energetic mirroring happening behind the scenes that most people never see. So when you break a karmic pattern in your lineage, when you stop people-pleasing, when you speak your truth, you're not just changing your life. You're shifting the dynamic between you and your twin. You're creating new pathways for connection. You're making it easier for both of you to meet in the middle. And they are doing work too. It might not look like yours, but their silence, their chaos, their ignoring phase, it's often their version of detoxing, of clearing out what no longer serves them, of trying and failing to be normal so they can realize that they're meant for more. They're not ignoring the journey. They're resisting it. And resistance is often the beginning of transformation. So instead of thinking, I'm alone in this, try shifting your view to, I'm laying a foundation for both of us. Because every brick you place in healing yourself becomes part of the bridge they'll eventually walk across. Something that often gets overlooked in twin flame dynamics is the core wounds that each twin carries. The divine feminine and the divine masculine don't just have different energies, they also carry different karmic and emotional patterns, shaped by their personal histories and soul contracts. And because their wounds are different, the way they awaken will also be different. The divine feminine often carries wounds of abandonment, unworthiness, not being chosen, and emotional repression. Her lesson is often about reclaiming her power, her voice, and learning to receive love without conditions. That's why her awakening feels emotional, spiritual, and deeply internal. It's rooted in reconnecting with her sacred self. The divine masculine, on the other hand, often carries wounds of inadequacy, failure, rejection, and pressure to be strong or perform. His lessons revolve around vulnerability, emotional availability, and tearing down the walls he built to survive. His awakening, then, looks like facing his fears in the outer world, confronting ego, and learning how to feel safely without shutting down. When we misunderstand this, we start thinking one path is more valid or important than the other. But they're both essential. They balance each other out. The feminine teaches how to feel. The masculine teaches how to stand in that feeling. One brings depth, the other brings groundedness. Together, they form a complete circuit. So instead of judging how your counterpart is waking up or how slow or messy it looks, ask yourself, what are they learning that I'm not? What are they healing in the places I can't reach? Because believe it or not, they are healing something that you too will benefit from. You're not just mirrors, you're complements. This realization softens the need to compare. It brings peace, and that peace makes room for love to flow again. Let's be honest. Once you've been on a spiritual path for a while, it's easy to start feeling like you know better. You've read the books, you've done the shadow work, you're watching the signs and seeing angel numbers and doing all the right things. And when your twin isn't on the same page, it's tempting to see yourself as more conscious, more evolved, or more enlightened. But that's a trap. Spiritual superiority is just ego in a different outfit. It says, I've done more inner work, so I'm ahead. But real spiritual growth is measured not by how much you know, but by how deeply you love, how much grace you extend, how patient you can be, how open your heart remains even when things don't go your way. And let's be real, judgment doesn't bring union. It creates distance. Even if you're technically right, being in your heart matters more than being in your head. Your twin is not your project. They're not here for you to fix, teach, or save. They're here to reflect you, to challenge you, to awaken parts of you that no one else can touch. And sometimes that awakening comes not through ease, but through frustration and surrender. So instead of asking, why aren't they doing the work like I am? Try asking, how can I love them right where they are without needing to change them? Because when you stop needing them to catch up, you create space for them to rise naturally without pressure. And that space is fertile ground for real transformation. If you take nothing else from this, let it be this. Comparison is poison on the twin flame path. It slows you down. It keeps you stuck. It pulls you out of presence and into ego. When you compare your journey to your twins, you rob yourself of your peace. You start making assumptions. You tell yourself stories. He doesn't care. He's not growing. He'll never wake up. And those stories start to shape your energy. They close your heart. They harden your expectations. But what if you chose to trust instead? What if you let go of needing the journey to unfold a certain way and started focusing more on your own alignment than theirs? What if you stopped looking at the timeline and just started living? Because the truth is, union doesn't come when both twins are equally awake in some quantifiable way. It comes when both have healed enough of their wounds to hold unconditional love within themselves and then eventually with each other. So comparison isn't just unnecessary, it's a distraction. And every time you release it, you reclaim your power. You return to your own path. You begin to walk with peace, no longer driven by what they're doing, but by what you're becoming. And ironically, that's when shifts start happening. Not because you forced them, but because you stop needing them. We talk a lot about awakening like it's some light switch moment. Boom, you're enlightened. But real awakening isn't about what you know, it's about what you live. You can read every book, take every course, and understand every spiritual theory. But if you can't hold compassion when things fall apart, or stay grounded when triggered, or offer love when it's hard, that's not embodiment. That's just information. And this applies to both twins. The divine feminine may awaken first in her mind and heart, but the real test is whether she can embody that awakening in real life. Can she stay rooted in love without needing reassurance? Can she choose alignment over attachment? Can she let her twin grow at their own pace without pulling or pushing? The divine masculine, in his own time, is also learning embodiment. For him, it looks like showing up, speaking honestly, learning how to feel and express emotion, releasing shame, becoming someone who is safe with his own heart. Both paths require courage, both demand presence, and both are valid. So awakening isn't about who got there first, it's about who became it, who lives it, who embodies the love this connection is here to birth. And in that embodiment, there is no hierarchy, only union. So are divine feminine twin flames more awake than the masculine? The honest answer? No, they're just awakening differently. One awakens through emotion, the other through action. One awakens through surrender, the other through challenge. One may feel it all deeply, the other may resist it until life breaks them open. But both are being shaped, both are being transformed, and both are moving toward the same center. So instead of labeling or comparing, let's honor each journey. Let's respect the timing. Let's trust that the soul knows the way, even when the mind doesn't. Because when you stop trying to figure it all out and just start being, in your truth, in your peace, in your love, you become a living invitation for your twin to awaken too. Not because you forced it, but because you embodied it. And that is what this path has been about all along.